109 children rescued in an operation that would have gotten a lot of attention if not for the other headlines that we're covering. So, I'm going to break down that story for you, plus answer one of your key questions from the news cycle this week. What does the president need from Congress, if anything, to get more involved in a foreign conflict? Let's get into it. I'm Jenna, and this is Smarter News. Hi, everybody. On a Friday, I usually like to leave a little time for our Anything But Politics segment. This is when we get to take a deep breath and maybe entertain other stories that don't have anything to do with politics, because politics is so involved in so many stories that we're talking about really over the last several months. But considering the news cycle and how many important headlines are coming across my desk, I just wanted to leave a little extra time for some housekeeping before we get into the weekend. I wanted to address one of your key questions from this week, which is, what does the president need exactly from Congress to get involved in what appears to be an evolving foreign war as we're continuing to watch the conflict between Israel and Iran? And I wanted to flag this story for you, a separate story that was happening back here at home, that in a typical news cycle would get a lot of attention. But considering all the news that's been happening, it didn't rise to that level. And a little background to all of this is, when I saw this story that involved law enforcement rescuing more than 100 children that were apparently involved in a variety of different ways in exploitation because of connections online with alleged criminals, I wanted more information. So I reached out to the FBI hoping to get an interview on this topic. That did not come to fruition this week, but I don't want to not flag this story for you, because this question about online safety and security and our children is such a big topic today. I think it's something that you should know about. So let's talk a little bit about that first. This is a big domestic story, Operation Sotaria Shield. This is an operation led by the FBI, along with partnering with more than 70 different agencies, a lot of different law enforcement involved on the state level and local level. And this particular area is focused in North Texas. The efforts of this operation, looking at online safety and rescuing children that are involved in horrific crimes, has been an ongoing effort, as the FBI was discussing, for more than 10 years. And think about that for a second. Think about how our online behavior has changed over the course of the last decade and the way our families are interacting with the internet. So this has been an ongoing effort, but this latest operation, Operation Sotaria Shield, took place over the last month or so, involving these 70 agencies. It led to the rescue of 109 children. It also led to the arrest of 244 individuals allegedly involved in child exploitation. Now, it is worth just mentioning, and I should have mentioned this at the top, that we are going to be discussing some pretty serious issues. And one of my pet peeves in the news is that we just launch into them without a little bit of a warning for younger ears in the room. So this is a little bit of a warning. I'm not going to go into anything too graphic, but these are serious topics. We're talking about the safety of children. We're also going to be talking about war. The FBI described these arrests centering around this sort of generic description: production, distribution, and possession of child sexual abuse material. But it's not limited to that. And I want the FBI to speak to that themselves. So I have a soundbite from them. Before I get to that, though, what does soteria mean? What is that word? It's not a word that I think I've ever used in broadcasts before. And I saw that it has origins to Greek mythology, specifically a goddess or a spirit. And the FBI actually talked about this as they began their press conference.
Soteria, the name of the operation, is derived from Greek mythology, and it represents safety, deliverance, and preservation of harm. And that is exactly what this operation delivers: safety for victims, and we hope it provides a pathway to healing.
The FBI went on to, again, give some examples. They also had a lot of local law enforcement partners. This, again, operation focused in North Texas, but really what the FBI was trying to get across here, as one of the leading voices in this press conference, is that this is just a microcosm of a much bigger issue. And one of the things law enforcement emphasized again and again and again is that our children are at risk more than ever, than any other time that they've seen, from danger from those that wish to do them harm. And in fact, there was a part in the Q&A at the end of this press conference that resonated with me in the description, thinking about my own childhood. I thought it would also resonate with you, and I want you to take a listen to this.
So I think for many of us, I'll speak for my generation, we were raised to be concerned about faceless strangers that might try to contact us or cause us harm on the street. But we've moved past that. Again, predators have access to our children in our home through technology. So we have instances, and we talked about them, where some of these individuals were arrested because they possess, distributed, or they produce child abuse material. We have also instances where individuals entice children to travel for the purposes of engaging in sex, or where individuals traveled across state lines to engage with minors for sex. So it is not just one threat we have to be concerned about. There's a multitude of threats and sophisticated predators that are using technology to target our children.
A little backstory to that question is there seemed to be a little confusion about, well, these children that were rescued, the 100 plus, were they, runaways? Were they just at-risk youth that suddenly found themselves in a even tougher situation considering their circumstances? And what law enforcement said is that in some cases, these children were not known to law enforcement at all. They would have no idea, if not for their investigative work, that these children were being abused in some way. And so they really wanted to explain that it's not just a certain profile of a child that could be getting exploited online. Also, really important here, how are these predators reaching children? Some of them are going to be obvious, social media being one. Another is apps, just generally apps that are then allowing children to interact with other people, sometimes unbeknownst. I know this as a parent, by the way, that when your child is looking at something online, it's an app. You think it's a drawing app. You don't realize that it allows them to communicate with other people. So that's another high risk area. And this also surprised me, but I guess it shouldn't. It may not surprise you. Online gaming, and this is also an area you download a game for your child to play while you're on an airplane. This happened to me the other day. My son really wanted access online. I didn't want to give it to him. It led to a little bit of a heated conversation, if you will, with a 10-year-old. But I knew that I did not want that risk of, I don't know enough about this game and I can't sit and look over your shoulder and see, are you interacting with another person? Are you playing with someone far away? How is this conversation going? How is this relationship developing? I don't have the ability to watch that, and I'm nervous about it. And I have to be honest with you, sometimes I question some of my choices when it comes to my children who have very limited screen time, and also their desire to have some enjoyment, play a video game. Well, it shouldn't be that hard to do. Listening to this press conference, which I will put in the show notes for you in case you'd like to listen to a little bit more, I really reaffirm that we have to be really careful about the access our children have outside of what we think are contained projects online. So one of the leading questions in all of this is, what can we do better? That's what I would hope to have as a topic of conversation as part of an interview, and to learn a little bit more about what are the trends that we're seeing online as far as online predators. What do we really have to watch out for? Law enforcement just emphasize again and again and again, be aware. You have to be aware of what your children are doing online. Even if it's not your child, it's a niece or nephew, just be aware of what's happening. So more on that as we get it. Again, Operation Sotaria Shield in this case led to 244 arrests and 109 children being rescued. So I wanted to put that on your radar. Let's turn to overseas. Obviously, a lot of activity, a lot of exchange of fire between Israel and Iran, and a constant question about whether or not this conflict will evolve into a much bigger conflict, and a lot of fear and concern around that. I hear your questions. I see them. I read them. I understand. And a lot of this is unpredictable. And no matter how much I'd love to report and provide to you some certainty in this very uncertain time, this is a constantly developing story. We talked at the beginning of the week about how important it was to watch for outside actors becoming more directly involved. Would you see Russia or China come to the aid of Iran? Would you see the United States come more directly to the aid of Israel? And some of the president's comments, President Trump's comments about his thoughts on this conflict have led to more questions. Well, if President Trump decided that the United States should be more involved in this conflict, can he just do that unilaterally? Does he need Congress? Wait a minute, I thought you needed Congress to declare war. What is this relationship like? So I'm actually going to use a reference for you. And this is a good reference when it comes to questions about the Constitution and the role of government, because we know that a divided government is so important for us. A divided government, equal branches of government, not divided politically. But in it, when we look at the Constitution, what can be confusing is that the president is the commander in chief of the U.S. military. So one would think, well, of course, as the commander in chief, he can just do whatever he wants to do. That's not exactly the case. In fact, the Constitution requires that Congress is the body, the governing body that would in fact declare war. What we saw over the last week is you had a few different lawmakers. In fact, Republicans, Democrats tried to at least they introduced a resolution that would keep President Trump from taking military action in Iran without congressional approval. And this has been an ongoing debate because the last time that Congress has declared war, that we've seen an official war declared by the United States, when do you think that was? World War II. Now, wait a minute. We've had a lot of wars since then. Vietnam, Korea, Persian Gulf, Iraq, Afghanistan. In these cases, Congress did not declare war. But these military actions happen. So, how did that take place? Well, it's not just about a declaration of war, which, by the way, let me just get a little bit into the nitty gritty. The War Power Resolution passed by Congress in 1973, over President Nixon's veto, by the way, sought to ensure that lawmakers have a role in approving armed conflicts involving the United States not formally declared as war. So, listen, Mr. President, you got to go to Congress no matter what. But we found that the president, just we say found over the course of history, the president has taken military actions without saying he's going to declare war. And our military has gotten involved for years, and there have been lives lost, and obviously a whole lot of debate about how the United States has been involved in past foreign conflicts. So the War Powers Resolution requires that in the absence of declaration of war, that a president report to Congress within 48 hours after introducing the United States military forces into hostility, which must end within 60 days unless Congress permits otherwise. So this essentially says, hey, okay, if you have to act, you can, but you still have to come to Congress for an approval. And by the way, there's a time limit on this. But again, we don't see presidents doing this, not in modern times. There's another option though, beyond a declaration of war, and that's an authorization for the use of military force. And this is what took place, for example, in 2002 regarding the war in Iraq, that the president was authorized for the use of armed forces in the ways that he deems necessary or appropriate to defend the national security of the United States. So it's a way of involving Congress without having an official war declaration, which not only has serious consequences on a global scale, but also politically for those who would vote for a war or not to get involved in war. So those are some specifics, but let me just kind of zoom way out again. In general, this question about how the president can act as commander in chief has been a debate that's lasted decades. And in the past, the president, in a variety of different administrations, Republican and Democrat, has acted unilaterally to involve the US military without seeking congressional approval on a regular basis. So, in theory, Congress should be the one to declare a war. But there's a lot of ways for us to be involved militarily that don't involve a declaration of war. And then we get into the back and forth of when do you need the authorization of use of military force? When do you need Congress? And what does that look like? One of the key reasons you do need Congress is Congress controls the purse. So any sort of funding of the Defense Department, any sort of extra money, the president cannot just simply authorize. So Congress does have to be involved. But if we saw sudden actions by the United States military that the president approved of in that exact moment, if the president is determining that this is in the interest of the United States and our national security, there's some leeway for him to act and not need Congress at all. In fact, there's not only leeway, there's past precedent. So there's always that question of what does the Constitution say? What does the law say? How is it actually applied? And this is just a little context to think about. Again, as we go into the weekend, one of the key things we're watching so many different things, aren't we? But one of the key things is who else potentially, when we're talking about different countries, gets involved more directly, more specifically in the ongoing exchange of fire between Israel and Iran. And what else is very key is not we want to watch for offensive. So in the past, the United States has been a defensive partner of Israel, helping it defend Israel against incoming missiles. If we see the United States taking a more offensive position, fighter jets flying over Iran and a more and dropping bombs. I mean, this sounds more exaggerated, but we're talking about a real offensive play. That would be a very drastic move and an important headline. And a sign that the conflict is further evolving. So just a little tip there. Even by the time you hear this, in the next hour or two, we could see a change in the conflict. But still, what we learned about how does President need Congress is that'll stay no matter what. So hopefully that was helpful. It was one of your key questions from social media, and I always love hearing your questions. And hopefully we can help answer them and illuminate a little bit of these quickly changing headlines in our lives. So we'll be back with more news at the beginning of next week, barring any emergency broadcasts that we need to do. But thank you for your support of Quick Insights, Nonpartisan, Smarter News. Have a great weekend.